Most, most gracious God, thank you for Nancy's presence with us today. Bless her presentation, bless us as we hear and learn, and guide us as your church to protect our children and to do what is right. We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, I welcome Nancy Bond with Nancy Bond Insurance, who is our Synod's insurance provider. Is that the right term? I never know if that's agent, provider, all in all, there for us when we need her, and always there for our Synod, and has agreed to do this. This is normally our time with our youth ministry leaders, and we've opened this up for anyone else who wants to join. So welcome all of you who have joined us today. And I'm going to hand it off to Nancy.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Terry. And it's really wonderful to be here. And when you listed all the names of what I am, I think I'm your friend. I feel like we're friends. That's what I appreciate the most. I wanted to start off with, you were given this little 2-pager, and I'm going to refer to it. So if those of you who are lucky to have 2 screens, maybe you could have it up on your other screen. If you're doing this on your phone, I'm sorry, but we'll make it very simple. I know everybody's heard about AB506, and I like to talk about what started this. Why do we have this legislation in the first place? So that when we give people new rules, or they think they have to make changes, instead of them being angry about it, maybe they'll understand why. And probably you may have already heard all this, but does anybody know why the legislatures and the assemblywoman from San Diego put forward this new legislation? Just have you heard about why? Okay. Usually, yeah, whoever said that. When there's, yes, correct. When there's a problem or a crisis, that's sort of like, maybe we don't want this to happen in our state. And so the Boy Scouts bankruptcy in 2021, where they have so far $850 million to pay the claims of over 60,000 sex abuse victims, that's what precipitated the new legislation. So this is nothing really very new. It just puts it in a law. So it's just that this now requires all organizations that serve children, which would mean youth serving organizations, which means churches. So that is us, to perform background checks on their volunteers and employees. And it specifies how it has to be done using the Department of Justice live scan fingerprinting process. Mm-hmm. And so that means whether you just have a preschool or a daycare or Sunday school or anything, we're required to follow this. So we can't really get out of it. And what is it saying? We need to have the Legislative Council then provides a summary of the law. It says, this is all I'm going to read legally wise, is the bill would require an administrator, an employee, a regular volunteer as defined of a youth serving organization, and we already defined a youth serving organization, to complete child abuse and neglect reporting training as specified. So that means they're going to tell us how we have to do it as specified. The bill would require an administrator, employee, or regular volunteer of a youth serving organization to undergo a background check as specified. So they're specifying live scan. The bill would require a youth serving organization to develop and implement abuse prevention policies and procedures, which I have to think for the last 20 years, we've been talking about doing this, so everybody should have them. But now we need to have, among other things, to make sure that people know how to report suspected incidents of child abuse to entities outside of the organization. Because the Boy Scouts, in what they did, and all of those abuse claims, they had lots of adult eyes looking and with the kids, but the people weren't trained to know what to do if they saw something that made them feel uncomfortable. Or maybe or maybe they told somebody and they were told, oh, don't talk about this, this will make us look bad. So they kept the information inside the organization. So that's why there's this now new push to make sure that any suspicions are reported outside of the organization to the state of California. And the training requirements may be met in a number of different ways. So there's a couple things that must be done specifically, and then there's something that may be done different ways. So we'll get into that. So how exactly do we comply? And that's the question really, right? Isn't that what we want to know today? Well, the first thing is we must be trained, and everybody must be trained. I used to say when we used to do our professional ethics and boundaries workshops, who shouldn't be trained? Well, everybody has to be trained now. If you're an administrator and you work at the church, or you're a volunteer, everybody needs to be trained if you interact, well, if you're an employee or you're a volunteer that interacts with children. So there's options on the training. We'll get into that in a minute. Now, the must way to do the background checks is, doesn't everybody already do background checks? And there are so many ways and so many vendors. And the background checks are very robust now. You can get your state, we can get the nation, we can get MVRs, we can customize it. If you've got a treasurer, we can get their financial backgrounds. We can get FBI, so we can get everything. And the systems that we use, the vendors also do the sexual abuse registry sites. The problem with this mandate is that live scan with fingerprints is perfect, but it only gets state of California convicted felons. And it doesn't get people from out of state. And it doesn't pick up if you're just on the sex offender registry. So it's just not good enough. This law was meant to raise the bar for our youth serving organizations. But in this one area with the background checks, I think it lowers the bar. I mean, if people say, well, then we're never going to do what we always been doing, we'll just rely on live scan. I don't think that's a good answer. I think we should do what we've been doing. And whether we like it or not, we have to now add the fingerprinting. So that's we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. And then we must have written procedures. And I think everybody already has some kind of written procedures. I can't imagine a congregation that wouldn't have some kind of written procedures already. We've been talking about this for years and years, and we can get samples to you. You can email me, I'll send you a sample of a written policy and procedure. But what needs to change now is that we have to talk about neglect. We can't just talk about training about sexual abuse prevention. We have to talk about how to notice signs of neglect or bullying. We need to add a little bit more to this, to our training. I mean, yeah, and put that in our procedures. So write down this note. There's some lawyers that have a really great organization that I refer to for a lot of this. It's Ministry Safe. And it's Love and Norris are the attorneys that organize this. And they've got wonderful resources, and that's all they do. They look from a legal perspective on how to implement policies and procedures. You can go through their program to get background checks, but you also have to do the live scan. You have to do the fingerprinting. So keep that in mind. The standard of care is what this talks about. And this talks about training and background checks and the skillful screening of people that we would have work with our children. We talked about the crisis. So really, who is this law applying to? And it's youth serving organizations. And I don't think anybody has a question. This applies to us. Does anybody wonder yet if this applies to you? Raise your hand. Well, I'll just tell you. It applies to all of us. We are youth serving organizations. What changes is in the law, it says a youth serving organization is an organization that uses people who are mandated reporters as their employees. So mandated reporters, if you don't remember, and you probably do, are people that are employed, that are paid in many, many professions, but as clergy, and as working with children. So when I teach Sunday school at my church, I'm not paid, I'm a volunteer. So I've always said, I'm not a mandated reporter, but morally, I consider myself a mandated reporter. I think this is gonna have to change because obviously the 2 adult rule, it says in the law, 2 live scanned mandated reporters. And so they're gonna, by the way, they say they're gonna have to clarify some of this law because it's not specific in this section, because volunteers are not legally mandated reporters. So what we're going to need to do is put in our policies and procedures that here at our church, if you wear our name tag, we're going to consider you a mandated reporter. And that's going to be, you're going to need the training to know where to go to call Child Protective Services. You could say, you can come to me as the pastor and tell me, but you need to also know that if you saw something happen, you yourself can go and should go and make a report. And that is the gap that they're trying to catch here. If you think back to the Boy Scouts, those people that volunteered were not mandated reporters, and they say they saw lots of things going wrong and they didn't tell anybody. So if you take anything from today, it's the change in mandated reporters. If we could apply that to our volunteers, then you can have a Sunday school class with 2 volunteers, 2 trained volunteers, and you'll be okay, because that's the intent of the law, is to have people that know how to they know how to make a report. So add that to your training. I think I'll stop for 1 second and see if anybody has any questions or discussions about that mandated reporter or how to implement this 2-adult rule. I'm looking at the chat side if anybody wants to say anything, or you can just raise your hand. Actually, I can't see you all, so raise your virtual hand.
I'll say if you can use the reactions raise hand feature, that helps you.
Carla has a question. Thank you, Carla.
Hey, Nancy, nice to see you. I
nice
have
to
a
see
hard
you
time
too.
taking my hand down, so please do that for me. So not a question about anything else. As you know, I've written and worked on these policies for years, but we have such a difficulty with the live scan. A, it's expensive. And B, when we went through the whole process, I mean, I'm holding my phone up to get the QR off of my computer. It never went through. So I was really hoping you could help us figure out faster, easier, simplified version of doing that, because we do all of the above, as you know,
Yeah.
and happy to add in the part about how to report. But
Yes.
and I myself have fingerprinted, but how do we streamline that? For me, I just don't have the means. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to talk about the fingerprinting specifics, and I guess we'll just jump right there right now. And I see some other hands before we do that. Does anybody else want to? Jeffrey, did you have a comment or a question?
I do. It's about, again, about the mandated reporters. It says that you have to have 2 on, you use the example of Sunday school, have 2 mandated reporters in the classroom. Is that the intention, or just 2 on site? And to become a mandated reporter, the training for volunteers, we understand, is 2 hours through the Department of Justice.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When you read the law, it says actually 2 live scanned mandated reporters in the classroom. And that's a problem. That isn't going to happen. That just isn't going to happen in a Sunday school, maybe in a preschool or a daycare. So the lawyers that I've consulted with said we need to do to the best of our ability, keeping our ministry open. And that's why they suggested that we elevate volunteers and that we consider them mandated reporters. And we train them to know how to do that. And that's pretty easy to do. Carla can tell you in about a couple minutes, I bet, locally. But I was talking to Terry before this started. We used to look up all this information. And now it's kind of like everybody has Google. So Google that. How do you mandate a report? Put in your zip code, and it'll take you directly to your local resources for where you call to make a report. Does that help at all?
But so my understanding, though, is that the training required is through the Department of Justice, and that's a 2-hour training.
At minimum.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. There is, for many years, Carla and I have been training using the Safeguarding God's Children material. And this has been something that's been known, and you have this, Jeffrey, at your congregation, and I've worked for many years. So you can use that training, because that training is about the sexual abuse prevention. And if you do both parts, it includes mandated reporting. And the only thing we need to do extra is make sure we add a bit about the neglect, so people understand about other kinds of abuse. And there is some of that in that training, but it's not just sexual abuse. it's physical abuse and neglect and bullying and those kinds of things. So if we can add that component to what we already have, we'll be in really good shape until they change the law or give us more specific information.
But that's not a Department of Justice approved or training. It's something else, correct?
You know what? The training is you shall, I mean, it's not a mandate that you have to use their training. They give you free training, and it's in a link to it is in that page I handed out. That's a minimum. That's if you can't get anything better. You can at least do this free training. It's
Okay.
just a bunch of slides with somebody talking to you. There's many, many trainings that are even better. But as long as it contains how sexual abusers groom children, and that's the main point. Let's see, I'm off my little script. We want to make sure that we include the two. Okay, so in the policies and procedures, which we already should have, we need to make sure we've got 2 trained adults in the classroom with kids for a couple of reasons, not just to protect children, but to also protect the adults from allegations that could be incorrect, false allegations. So it's better for me to not sit in the classroom alone with a bunch of little kids or teenagers or whatever. So 2 trained adults, and that's the big difference, so that people are trained and know how to watch for these warning signs of children that may have been groomed. To understand the grooming process of the preferential offenders, to know how they worm their way into your life, how they work with maybe single moms and they help the kids do the homework, and how they take advantage of vulnerable people to get our trust. And who else do we trust but people in the church? So especially if they want to come to work with children in the church. I see many other hands and I feel like I should give them a chance to ask a question. Pastor Rick, you're the next one I see on my screen.
Hi, thanks, Nancy, for this information. I just had a question about the paragraph that you read with the language of the law or the bill. It says the bill would require an administrator, employee, or regular volunteer of a youth service organization to undergo a background check as specified. Now, is that mean a volunteer who is regularly with that works at the youth service organization, or someone who specifically works directly with youth? I'm thinking of people we have a preschool, and so we have people who work in the kitchen. We have an office administrator. They don't work directly with the youth. Would they have to undergo a background check?
That's a good question. The question I would always ask would be, do they have access to the children? Is there any way that they could be one-on-one with kids? Is there any lack of supervision to where a kitchen worker might take a child to the bathroom by themselves? So I would say if a kitchen worker that is in the preschool, they should definitely have a background check, probably for licensing, they would be required to. Custodians, I don't know. Do they have access to the kids? Would they have a way to have one-on-one with them? Carla, what's your idea about that? I want to call upon you.
Oh, well, basically what you said, I mean, anyone, if by licensing anybody who has access to kids who would be alone with them has to be background checked. I mean, I think we know that. And I think every place, and also licensing requires the fingerprinting. So yeah, no disagreement on that one. Increasing the range of who that is, great. I just want to make sure I can afford it. Thanks.
Yeah. Did that help at all? Pastor
Okay,
Rick?
so it's not necessarily just people who work directly with children, but it's somebody who could potentially have access or be alone with children, that the recommendation would be that they should be background checked as well and fingerprinted.
Yes.
Yeah.
I gotta just say, just like a school, everybody at the school has to go through the background check because anyone could be around other children. So therefore, follow that guideline.
Okay. Even like custodians, Pastor Carla, and people who don't work directly with children at schools, they are required to go through a background check.
I don't know how it was for you. We don't have a preschool right now, but I know at San Marcos, anyone who would go down there regularly would have to have a background check because of the accessibility issue. Yes.
Okay.
I want to tell you that maybe 8 or 10 years ago, a pastor called me and said, we just found out that our custodian is on the sexual offender registry list. And now everybody's mad at me because I found that out. So yeah, you can't be too safe. You can at least, do those other background checks as you get to a policy where you're going to be able to get the money to get everybody live scanned.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Sure. Josiah, I see your hand. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for doing this, Nancy. Appreciate your time. Yeah, just about 45 minutes worth of questions for me. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry, too early. So my question is about ages. So if we have volunteers, I think that's one thing our church council and we talked about a couple of years ago, the difference between helpers and volunteers, because you can't do live scan or finger check, right, for like kids 17 and younger. That starts at 18 older. I just want to make sure and clarify that.
That's correct.
Okay, so we can have volunteers of any age 17 and under, correct, and don't have to worry about that?
Well, you need to do training and you
Well,
need to have, yes, correct. See,
Okay.
if you're a minor and you had a conviction, it wouldn't be on your record yet until you're 18.
Got it.
It'd be a waste of time.
Okay, perfect. And then just two quick ones. So in terms of having AA groups on site, I don't know if any other church does that. And with these new rules, when we're talking about background checks for everyone, what's the recommendation there?
Well, what do you all think about that? If you have AA groups during your time when your youth are there, usually they're at night but I don't know.
Yeah, and we have a small campus. We have an AA group that meets in one of our classrooms, and we do have youth group occasionally at the same time. So I just wanted to just throw that out there and see what the thoughts are, because I'm all for whatever is we're told to do. I just want to hear from here and then bring it to council and our pastor just to make sure we're following the best practices, especially if this is the direction moving forward.
Well, I have never heard of any organization requiring an outside organization to get background checks in order to use their space. Has anybody else dealt with this with AA groups or anything like that?
I'd just say at two churches I've been at, we made sure our AA groups, any of our outside groups weren't meeting the same night as our youth group was there.
That makes good sense.
And we just confirm that they have a protection of minors policy, these outside groups.
Do you read those and look at them?
Yeah.
I'm not in charge of that. I don't really know what that person does. But
That's good to know. All right. No, I appreciate it. That's helpful. And then one last quick one. The week of VBS, we usually get about 120 kids here, and we have adult volunteers that we've known for years, or they might be at another church. So what is the recommendation there? Because that seems like going through all this would be a lot. And we already struggle with volunteers, and obviously we're going to do what we need to be safe and follow the rules. But I just wanted to reach out about that, because I mean, we might not be able to do VBS if we have to. So yeah, I'll throw that out there.
There's a little part about certain number of hours a month that a volunteer works.
Okay.
How many hours would be the maximum hours for Vacation Bible School if you had it for a week or however long you did it?
Yeah, we do 9 to noon, so it'd be 15 hours. It's a Monday through Friday.
The threshold is 18 hours in a month.
Oh, perfect.
So even though I'm not a person that wants to avoid the rule,
Right.
having a background check is a great idea. So if you can say to in your training for VBS, you've got to do some training so that people can, because now you're going to have a lot of kids and you're going to have a lot more volunteers. This would be a great opportunity to give them some training to just a simple down and dirty. What are the warning signs of children that are being abused and molested? How do adults groom children so that they can know at least some warnings? They're going to see a lot of kids. And you can do at least the free meganslaw.com. You can look up,
Right.
you can do some basic things, just say, and again, I'm not a lawyer. I always have to say that. I work with a lot of lawyers. I'm not an accountant. I always say that, but I've worked with them all. Show your intent. Show that you are being organized and organize and keep records of what you're doing for your training and have people. That way, at least you can show if something bad happens that you were a prudent corporation and you did the best you could.
Thanks, Nancy. Yeah, we do follow all that. We still do training and all that, but that's just good to know. I didn't, the 18 hours or less, that's really helpful. Because sometimes we'll have, yeah, that's good. Thank you. Those are all my questions, unless
Okay.
there's someone else that wants to talk about how good my haircut looks. But I'm good with that.
Was gonna comment on
It
that.
looks good. Looks
Just
nice.
before, I know there's other people with their hands
Yeah.
up, but Nancy, there is a question in the chat about clarifying. It says to clarify, a volunteer means someone who works with kids more than 18 hours a month.
I don't like to give a loophole, because if I volunteer at my church, I have to be live scanned if I'm even going to work one day. So I just think that you need to have a rule or a guideline and set it for everybody. Why are we looking for loopholes? Because that's when the pedophile might sneak right in. At my church, the volunteer pays for their own live scan if possible. We ask us to do it. We don't say we're going to pay for it. If somebody has trouble, we'll work with them, but we ask the volunteer to pay for that. I see another hand. And I'm sorry if I'm not going in the right order. Let's see, Gary, you've had your hand up for a long time.
Yes, thank you. I'm trying to clarify this for preschools, Nancy. The licensing requirements, to the best of my knowledge, and I'm a layperson, don't always require 2 teachers in a room. But you're saying that this law requires that.
2 adults. Yeah, so schools need to follow their licensing. Whatever the school licensing, remember, teachers are professionals and they should have been trained, and preschool teachers have had a lot of training on this. But we're talking non-school perhaps here. We're talking.
All right, so I shouldn't worry about the 2-person requirement.
I do worry about it if I was a teacher, but legally, no.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay, Steph. Ascension.
Hi, I'm Stephanie and I'm from Ascension, and I have a 2-part question. One of our Sunday schools teachers is certified through the San Diego Unified School District. When I brought up the fingerprinting mandate, she said, I've been fingerprinted. Does she have to do it again? No.
Yes, she does, because her fingerprints went to her employer, her records. Yeah, I've had other people tell me they have to get fingerprinted in your organization.
Okay, and they also have to, everyone who is a Sunday school teacher will be mandated to take that 2-hour training, which is a different number. It's not live scan, it's something else.
Right, the live scan is just the background check. So if you remember, we have 3 things. One is the training. So there's a link on the little page I gave you for at least a minimum. If you're in a hurry to get it going, there's a 2-hour class they can take for free at home.
Okay, I didn't see a link on anything I got, and I have it in front of me. It's right in front of me. And so all it has is a link is www.nancybondinsurance.com. That's the only link I have.
Stephanie, I emailed out that PDF form. Did you get my email this morning? It was an attachment to that.
Oh, could you resend it?
Yeah, I also put it in the chat earlier, but I'll resend it.
In the
Stay
chat,
online afterwards to make sure I have your right email address, because I
You
did
betcha,
that.
thanks.
So.
It's on page 2 and it's mandatedreporterca.com. And so it's through the California Department of Social Services.
Okay, so mandatedrecorderca.com.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
Stephanie, I'll send you that sheet again, because there were 2 pages of.
yeah,
bunch
I
of
didn't see
links.
that. I looked.
Yeah. And Nancy, there's a question in the chat. Pastor Carla asked her. Stephanie, are you done? You have more? Okay.
Nope, I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Carla,
Pastor
I see it.
Carla, see
I
that
see a
question?
question that is the background check, where'd it go? Done through your insurance company good enough? Only if it includes fingerprints. The mandate now is live scan Department of Justice fingerprinting. So that's the pain point. And yeah, how are we going to pay for it? That's going to be an issue. Where do we get that in our budget? But that's what the law is. Sorry. Do we have any other hands that I'm missing? Let's see, let me look at, gotta click.
Do
to
not
click.
see any.
Okay. Well, good. We're going along. Now I gotta try to remember how far we got. I think I went all over the place.
Vacuum, vacuum. Wipe. Bake and spritz.
Okay. Well, basically, we really did talk about the 3 parts, and I just want to make sure everybody, so we just talked about the training. The minimum would be through the California Department of Social Services. They've got that link. If you use other trainings, you can go to Ministry Safe, and they have trainings. You can Google Safeguarding God's Children, which we've used for years and years, and get training. We can talk about doing another training session. We've been doing this for, I think, 20 years or longer. So training, I'm just going to take a check on here. Yeah, Jim made a good comment. Who wants to be the administrator who decided not to check on someone? You're going to be in big trouble. You have to do it. I'm going to see if I have anybody else. I think we got all the questions.
Yeah, I've kind of been watching it.
Thank
So,
you, thank you.
oh, now you've got one. The bishop has a question.
Okay. There's a lot of ways. So just if they Google live scan in your area, there is in my live scan background check section, you'll see it's blue. It talks about California Department of Social Services live scan providers. If you click on that link, it also then gives you by zip code providers, vendors for live scan. And some suggestions are, and I said this many years ago, the organization signs up to, let's see, I've got this written down. The organization is going to register with the Department of Justice. Oh, good. There you go. Thank you, Terry. You're going to register with the Department of Justice to be an organization that needs to do background checks. So first of all, the church is going to register. And then the person, you download the form and you can pre-fill it. It's a fillable PDF and you take that with you to the live scan vendor. You can also have a vendor come on site on a Saturday or on a Sunday and just say, we're going to have a live scan party. We're going to buy donuts for everybody and we're going to all get live scan together. So that's one way some congregations have done it in the past. Seems like a good idea. If you haven't done it yet, just get everybody together. But what you'll have to do is have a procedure for going forward. So you just, first of all, the church needs to be registered as a youth serving organization so that they will give you the records. And then you send people to get fingerprinted. They have machines, so they do it electronically, or they can use the old-fashioned fingerprinting. You can take the form to the police department and they'll do that for you there. So it's just first of all, to get the account set up. The fees are waived for nonprofits, but there are still going to be some fees, not all the fees. And if you want to add the FBI background check, I was told it's another $15. But it depends on, now's when you got to be logical. If you're hiring a new youth leader, I say go all out and do everything you can for that new youth leader, your employee, your paid leader of your staff. If you're going to have somebody like me who's going to be on a rotation and I'm going to be in the nursery or teach Sunday school, once every 3 weeks, and you know who I am and I've done my live scan and I've done the training, then you're probably okay. So this is when you have to be responsible and just kind of have a mastermind group of people who are the leaders and in charge, and just set up your rules and then apply them to people. How does it come? If a church has a preschool that is not separately incorporated, I always think that the church and the school are one entity and they should have one account. Now, if you've got a licensed preschool, they may already have their own account, and then the church usually piggybacks onto their account. The background time period, somebody asked, how often do you have to do the fingerprint checks? Every 2 years. The training is every 2 years. I think that sometimes you can sign up for a change in status, and different vendors offer different things. So if you've done a background check on somebody, you can pay a small fee and they'll monitor somebody's status that might change. In my experience, and I'm only in Region 2, and so I'm not across the whole country. In my experience, when a congregation and a school sets up policies and procedures and does background checks on people, and they do training, would-be pedophiles are going to leave. They're not going to try to volunteer because they're going to get caught. They don't want to talk about this with you. They don't want to get caught. So just by doing these minimum requirements, it's going to weed out, hopefully, would-be sexual offenders. Jeffrey, I see your hand again.
I apologize if I'm going out of your flow, out of sequence
It's
here.
all right, we're messed up.
I'm going back to mandated reporters.
Okay.
Offsite experiences where you're collaborating with other congregations. Are we going to be required to bring 2 mandated reporters to those offsite experiences or shared experiences with other congregations who will probably be bringing mandated reporters to that experience as well?
Well, that's a good question. Who's going to be watching that or, monitoring who's coming? What kind of a youth event are you? Can you give a specific example?
Well, for example, here in San Diego, we're trying to grab some churches together who might be interested in doing some more regional youth ministry. So maybe we get together at a park, our youth groups coming together, playing beach volleyball or something. My church brings one mandated reporter, and another church brings another mandated reporter. Okay, at this experience, we have 2 mandated reporters, right? But is that kind of going around the
Well, I guess 2 things pop in my mind. The first one is I don't want to take any kids anywhere by myself. So I wouldn't ever have just me being the one. That's a lot of responsibility on me. And if anybody makes an accusation against me, how do I defend myself? So that's my first problem. But,
okay, clarify that, maybe parents drop them off at this site,
Sure. The other thing you said we're at the park or we at the beach. You're outside. So if it's safer for COVID, it's safer for sexual abuse, also for prevention. Because the main point would be, a bigger picture than just the law is to protect kids, is that we want to be out in the open and we don't want to be hiding. We don't want to be one-on-one in a, taking the kid to the bathroom or in a hidden room in the church building. So the general idea about being out and open and making it safe for everybody, I mean, that gives me a comfort level. As a risk manager, as a paid paranoid, I would feel much better and I wouldn't worry about exactly how many mandated reporters and how many people have had the same training that you have had. Do you ever talk to the other leaders at these other churches, what kind of training they're doing? That might be a whole nother conversation. So I can't give you a yes or no on that. I'm sorry, okay. But you have your knowledge. And I think here's the other thing that comes to me, when they make a law, what's going to happen if you break one of the rules, right? Who has the stick? Well, the law was written in a way where they didn't have any compliance written into it, except for one thing. They said the insurance companies now can ask you to prove to them that you're following these laws, that you're doing all these things. Well, that's nothing new. Insurance companies, every application, every time you get a renewal, you have to answer questions. Do you have policies and procedures? Do you follow, these things? So that's nothing new. But I can tell you that more and more, it's going to get harder and harder on insurance renewals for sexual abuse prevention, malpractice coverage. They may lower the limits. They may make you prove that you're doing these best practices. So they're kind of like, we're going to give it to them to take care of it. The lawyers said they've been asking the legislators for some more clarity, and they believe more clarity will come, but laws take a long time. And so probably in another year or 2, they'll tighten up and give more specific direction on this. But as far as today, we must have the best practices of trying really hard to do the live scanning on as many people as we possibly can. Try to figure out a way to get that done. Do a bake sale. I mean, it's $70, maybe $100, depends. I've read on so many different things. Mine was $72 when I paid for mine. It's free to do the background check on, at least looking at Megan's Law, looking at sexual abuse registries. There's lots of vendors and lots of ways that you can get what I think are the better background checks, because they're more than just California. So I think if we do the best practices on doing the background checks, then the best practices on training. I think training is the most important part, because if everybody really knows what we're doing together, what to watch for, we can help each other. Because Carla and I learned a long time ago, you gotta trust your gut. When you got a bad feeling about something, there's a reason for that. God gave us feelings and emotions, and we need to trust our gut. And if we all know that we're all trusting our gut, maybe I can say to Terry, you know, that person over there did something that seemed really inappropriate to me. What do you think? That'll help us be stronger as an organization, and it make ourselves a safer place. And then, you know, as a base, you know, there's no excuse not to have some written policies and procedures. Now, the problem is you can have policies and procedures, but if you never look at them and if you never train from them, then you're kind of in trouble also. Because if, let's just say in the future, if some allegation happens and somebody really does sexually abuse or harm a child in your care, and then the legal team and the lawyers are going to find out you had a policies and procedures, but it was on a shelf and you never looked at it, or that you had some training manuals, but you never used them, you're going to be in big trouble also. So it's all of those things that we have to do. So even if you can't be perfect, we need to do the very best we can and raise the bar. This is a really good opportunity to say to people who have been fighting you, I'm sorry, now we have to have these trainings. Now we don't have any choice. People always used to blame me or the insurance company, but now you can blame the state of California assembly people. And so here's another stick, right? I heard a little noise. Does that mean we are supposed to stop, or we're supposed to get questions, or?
You've got a couple people with hands up, Jeremy
Okay.
and Pastor Carla.
Thank you. Jeremy first. Hi, Jeremy. Nice to see you.
Hi, Nancy. Good to be seen. Bishop Andy has a thing in the chat, and I wanted to make sure we didn't get lost on the question he asked, because it does apply, you know, where I'm at right now. We're a SOC, and we're trying to build all this stuff for the first time. So repeating Bishop Andy's question, how does a congregation get started with LiveScan?
Well, click on the link that you have in this page, and it tells you how to get registered with LiveScan. Terry's going to show it again. If you click on that, yes, right there. I guess it's not live on your thing, but that will take you, and I don't want to do it while I'm doing it. Oh, she's going to do it now. And inside this document, it will tell you where to go to get registered as an organization. So I hope that helped you. You just have to register as an organization. And then there's a form, a PDF that everybody can fill out that you can grab right from that website. That isn't coming up, but.
And does that get renewed, or is that one and done?
The organization applies one time to be a provider, and then it's a one and done.
Thanks.
Yes, and that doesn't cost you anything. Right. Carla has her hand up.
I'm sorry to come back to this. I've been doing this kind of stuff with you and with the Synod for a long time. However, I just wanted to clarify this because I'm in a situation now where the cost would be prohibitive. We are discussing, should we charge $5 or $10 per kid for VBS? And that's the situation I'm in right now. So I want to go back to what I'm hearing you say. I did talk to my insurance company about this. I did watch their video on it. I am using, not right now, Safeguard. I'm using the one that's offered through our current insurance company. We are doing their background check, which we got at a discount, which was more affordable. We could do that. So to hear you say that it will be the insurance companies that will be eventually tasked with enforcing things, if my insurance company told me we're not changing our policy. We think our policy is good because it includes the training, includes background check, it includes having a policy written, all of which we have. Then I'm hoping I can go with those who are working 18 hours or less and do what I currently have. I'm not changing that standard ever. And those who are more or employees, I will do the live scan on, which I just can't quite get into place before our scheduled VBS. So that was my great concern. I never want to be out of compliance with the law, but if I'm understanding correctly, that's what I'm hearing. I'd be happy to share our experience with anybody who needs it because I've been following this kind of policy for over a decade.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. It's the 18 hours. So I think for Vacation Bible School, that would be very helpful.
Okay. All right. Well, if anyone needs me, reach out to me if you want any information about what I'm doing or what we're doing at St. Mark's.
So you're talking about your sample policy and procedure kind of thing?
Correct. Yeah.
I want you to email that to me, Carla.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you. I'm a collector of policies and procedures. Yeah. All right. I see that Shirley made a note that she signed up for the change of status if somebody becomes an abuser, so she'll get a report. So that's good to know. You should be able to do that. Thank you. Okay. Does anybody else have a question or a comment about this? You know, my whole intent today was to hope to make this easy or doable and not just be such a big burden. But if you just remember the three things, the three areas of focus, and maybe the biggest changes to me would be, I hope you will train your volunteers to consider themselves mandated reporters and make it easy for them to make a report. And nobody can get in trouble. People always say, what if I'm wrong? Will I get sued? No. If in good faith you believe you're saying the right thing and you make a report, you should do that. And you should have policies in your organization of who legally is a mandated reporter. So maybe not only you should make the phone call, let me know. I'm the pastor. I'm the director of the school. I'm the youth pastor. I mean, make sure you tell them to communicate to the church, because if the church doesn't know and you went outside, that's going to just give you trouble. You really need to be in good communication. Let's see. Somebody just wrote down.
Pastor
best
Carla,
piece of
do you
advice
still
was-
have a question? Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Here's a question in the chat. Does the custodian of records need to be an employee?
The custodian of records for, I don't know the answer to that. Do you know, Carla? Does anybody else know? I don't. I think it's a good idea, but it's got to be somebody perhaps on the council, somebody with authority.
Is that the custodian record? Is that what the DOJ is asking for? We applied for live scan at a church that I was at before, and we had, it's been years ago, so I can't remember if that's the terminology, but our pastor was that person. That's who the records came to when those came back.
I believe the DOJ requires that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
And
would
that's the
s-
person we used in our congregation, because we figured, I don't know if that was right, but we figured that that was the person who was going to be there the longer, where council members were changing, you know, that we thought the pastor would be the most consistent.
I totally agree with you. It makes the most sense to me. Volunteers go off and you never know what they're doing. And if they still get people's personal information, that wouldn't be appropriate. Okay. Right. I'm glad you thought of that, Shirley. You'll have to appoint it to somebody else. So they'll take over being the person in charge when you retire. That's exciting to look forward to. Okay, anybody have any other comments or questions or needs that they didn't get answered from today?
I'll just offer, if anybody wants what we have, I'm not saying I do it perfectly. I'd love more insight, but just feel free to email me. I put my email in the chat. And so that'll be kind of what this congregation does, if you'd like to see.
Is it easier, Pastor Carla, for you just to email it to me and I can send it out to everybody? rather
I'm
than
not
the
ready
phone
and it's a
email?
day off. Yeah, I don't care, whatever's. All right,
Okay.
thanks, Terry. I want to look over and make sure I know what I'm saying, so I need a little time.
All right.
Amy, I see your hand.
Hello. I don't have the email document. Perhaps Terry, perhaps it just didn't get to my email this morning in time when I last checked it was around 11 o'clock this morning.
I sent it out earlier. I can try it again. I'll
Yeah,
double
I
check.
didn't
Stay
get it,
on the
so I
line
don't-
to make sure I have your correct email address.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
She also put it as a PDF in the chat a little while ago. Okay, we can't hear you, Amy. You're muted.
Oh,
There we go.
I'm sorry. I don't know how to access the chat on this. I'm not very technologically minded with this stuff right now, but yeah,
Yeah.
I'll stay on and
Stay
I'll
on
make
and
sure
I'll
you get my
confirm I
email.
have the right address for you.
Okay, thank you. Can you take my hand down? I don't know how to do
Yep.
that either.
I can do that.
You go like this. All right, I'm gonna double check that we're not missing anything.
Do
I
not-
really appreciate seeing people. I mean, even though we're not in person, I love it when people put their camera on their faces, even if they don't have, not dressed up, or if they're home, it's just nice to see people. So thanks for coming and letting us see your face to be together like this.
Jeff has a question in the
Yes.
chat.
Okay,
Does the definition of administrators include church council or executive team? Did you answer that and I missed it?
I think people said probably it should be the pastor, but somebody who's going to be at church for a while, as opposed to a volunteer. I guess it's really up to you to decide.
In terms of getting background checks, though,
Yeah.
it certainly, it seemed like the Department of Justice, or it was AB 506, was requiring anybody in an administration to get a background check.
Oh, you mean, should they be back? Oh, I thought you meant, do they need to be the recipient of the, oh, no, everybody on staff at church should be background checked for sure. And especially the pastor.
But
And-
not necessarily like our church council or executive committee, because they're kind of the administrators of our organization, right?
Well, Terry, give them your thoughts on that.
I'm sorry, I was typing and I
Oh.
can't listen well and type at the same time, apparently.
Well, somebody practically, I mean, I've
Oh.
got an outsider view. His question was, should the administrators and the executive council at the church who's running the church, like the business leaders of it, should they have background checks?
At one church I was at, we didn't, and at one church we did. And part of it was an example too. These are the people leading our congregation. We want them at our church events. There are going to be kids there, and we want. I think it was more of a leadership and example than it was practicality of like how many of them are actually going to be around kids. So we were asking others to do it, and our leadership did it. So
Yeah, leadership by example. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, but Nancy, what you said earlier was, if you have a reasonable expectation that these people could be alone with children, those are the people that you absolutely want to get background checked and go through live scan. And the rest, when you put together your policy as a congregation, you can say, we're going to include church council on that because they're the leaders and this is just what we do. Or you can come up to another decision, I would think. But the main thing is, if you're going to err on the side of safety.
Yeah. Thank you. Matt, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to similarly, going back to Josiah's question earlier about VBS, and this might have come from paperwork from you at one point, Nancy, I don't know this idea, but our policy distinguishes between primary volunteers and secondary volunteers, particularly for the purpose of VBS, that when you have prohibitive number of volunteers where the cost of doing a live scan for everybody would just be ridiculous for VBS. We don't have 120 kids. I wish we did, but for that. But what our policy does is distinguish between primary volunteers who we do have a reasonable expectation that they may be alone with children, and secondary volunteers who our reasonable expectation is they will always be with one of our primary volunteers when they are around children. And so that's, and there's enough people in the program that are called primary volunteers that are designated that way, that I'm confident enough that we have eyes for people that have gone through those background checks, you know, in every part of our program. So that's one way that we handle it.
Yeah, if we have enough people that have eyes to see, and ears to hear what's going on, and mouths to speak and make those mandated reports, talk to, you know, that's the point right there. So that, thank you for sharing that. And then you also have the 18 hours in a month. And unless your vacation Bible school is really all day long, I mean, if we're going to be legalistic, which I guess we're talking about, that could probably help. Thanks. Oh my goodness, we have 1 minute left.
It's you guys. Any last question?
No, Jeffrey from Calvary, it seems like you have a lot of experience. What would you like to summarize here? I'm wondering.
Come again, I'm sorry.
Well, you've got a lot of activities. I just thought maybe you have a summary is coming. How long have you been at Calvary?
Just 2 years.
Okay. And practically speaking, what can you take away from this new law and what are you going to do about it?
Well, you know, practically speaking, there's some really some significant challenges in recruiting, training, and really sustaining volunteers. Our volunteer pool is small to begin with, but boy, kind of three. My takeaways are kind of three things. You know, your policies. Make sure your policies are best practices. Training. Hey, everybody has to experience training, and then have everybody become really mandated reporters. Just carrying that out, though, there's going to be some significant challenges.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also know from I'm not a young mom with young kids, but I'm around a lot of young families and young kids, and they're attracted to ministries that take this seriously. And so when we instituted new rules and guidelines, we kind of raised the bar. It's like, oh, I qualify to be a volunteer now. So it's kind of like more people wanted to step up. It doesn't always work, but it also can show people that we are taking this seriously and that we are trustworthy for you to give us your children and let them come to our programs, because we have these policies and procedures, and this is not going to happen. Because parents today are so afraid of what bad things could happen. There's so many crazy stories going around. And if we can give them some assurance that that we love their kids and that we're going to treat them with respect, and we know what we're trained, I think that'll give a lot of comfort to people that entrust their children with our ministries. All right.
All right. Well, thank you, Nancy,
You're
so
welcome.
much. And thank all of you for being here. I'm going to put Nancy's email, because she said that was okay, in the chat if you need. And if you think of things afterwards, let me know. Give me a few days and I'll get the recording of this posted on our Synod website under the 4 congregations tab. And as well as the resource document there. So,
and please feel free to email me if you have any suggestions for something I missed or you want more information. I'm good at email, so please feel free to do that. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll say goodbye. Youth ministry leaders, we will meet again in May. But watch the Facebook page for the date, because our third Thursday is actually Synod Assembly. So I can guarantee you we won't meet on that date. So thank you all. Have a good day.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
again, Nancy.
Thank you all.
Amy stand. Where's Amy?
Terry,
Yeah,
I'm gonna go back and check my email again right now. And if I still don't have it, because you had my email correct, it
Yeah.
looks. So I'll go back and check. Maybe I just missed it.
yeah, it was about 9:15 this morning and the subject line said Zoom link / resource and it was attachment to that.
All right, I'll look for it. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Good to have you here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Hi, Kitty. I was going to let you know that I recorded this and I probably should stop recording. Yes, sure. Yeah.